So one of the reasons the black-eyed children phenomenon has remained so psychologically effective is because it exploits something deeply human and instinctive. Children are supposed to symbolize vulnerability. Human beings are biologically wired to protect them. So when we see a child alone at night asking for help, our immediate reaction is almost always empathy before suspicion. The black-eyed children stories distort that instinct in a profoundly uncomfortable way.
I gotta go potty.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Darkling Chronicles. Tonight's episode is inspired by Helen. She is someone who's followed my TikTok page for a very long time. She is someone who has sent me lots of stories, really cool ones, including The Cauliflower is Haunted. Love that one. Her daughter Erin has recently encountered something really spooky. They were having Christmas Day at the grandparents' house, and when everything was eaten and cleaned up, they're all in the front room, and Erin decided she needed a drink. So she goes out into the kitchen by herself. She sees a little girl outside of the door with no eyes. Black, where eyes should be. And needless to say, she was very scared. She didn't go and tell Helen immediately, but she did. Helen managed to get it out of her. And she told her mum what she'd seen, and her mum said, "Are you sure it wasn't your reflection?" And she said, "Yeah, mum, I'm sure," because this little girl was wearing a white dress. And that night, Erin was wearing jeans and a blue hoodie. It made me think, was this a black-eyed child? Or was it just a child that was kind of attached to Erin because she'd been somewhere that maybe she'd picked up this attachment from? Now, Erin was in her room one night and the cat did jump up on her bed. And as the cat jumped up on her bed, she heard this like whispering in her ear that said, "Hi." But she felt the breath on her neck too. Oh, this poor kid, honestly. Helen messaged me. I said a few things to do. I'm not sure if it's because of what I said that it's not happened anymore. They did like a little bit of a cleansing, said some prayers, did all that kind of stuff, and it's not happened since. So it could have been a nice ghost who attached to her from wherever she'd been and was just trying to like get her attention because, you know, kids do that. But I have heard also that black-eyed kids or black-eyed children, they knock people's door. And they're very sinister and they pretend their car's broken down. As you're going to see, I've created a whole episode for you. It's a whole thing. We're going to be here for a while. So get comfortable, okay? But I just thought I wonder if it is. Because they do actually, some people, when I read through some forums, they'd actually had nightmares about the black-eyed children. So they weren't just knocking at the front door. So the fact that this spirit said hi to her, sometimes a lot of dark things always show themselves as kids because kids are vulnerable. You trust kids. If you were to see a ghost kid, if you were to see a kid at the side of the road, you obviously stop because you want to try and help that child. That's what they take advantage of, these things. Oh, they're creepy. Now I've conjured up some creative magic for you here. I've done a bit of research and I'm going to read you what I've written. And at the end, I'm going to read you some Reddit stories from people who have experienced the black-eyed kids. And some of them were like, nah, not for me, thank you very much. Stay as far away from me as possible, thank you. Before I start though, just want to give you all a massive shout out. There's loads of new people that have followed this page. Thank you so much for being here, for listening to me waffle on about things that I'm just really interested in. And hopefully you are interested in too. It means a hell of a lot to me. There are more of you listening though than there are following, so if you don't mind, don't worry, we're not in a committed relationship. You can unfollow me whenever you want. I won't be mad at you, won't be sad if this podcast isn't for you and it turns out it's not for you. That's fine. But in the interim, could you please hit follow, because it really helps me out. It helps the platform show that like my page is growing and I'm worth kind of pushing out into the algorithm. And it's all the boring stuff, but it really helps me out. I've put a lot of work into it and I love talking to you guys. So click that button. That'll be amazing. Anyway, let's get into tonight's episode, the black-eyed children. Now, there are certain urban legends that feel deliberately fictional from the very beginning, and they arrive wrapped in exaggeration, spectacle, and theatrical horror, allowing the listener to enjoy them comfortably from a safe emotional distance. Ghost trains carrying the dead through abandoned tunnels, cursed dolls moving in the dark, shadow creatures lurking beneath beds. These stories entertain us because they announce themselves as stories. The Black-Eyed Children are different. Perhaps it's because the encounters themselves are so strangely simple. There are no dramatic attacks, no grotesque transformations, no elaborate mythology involving ancient rituals or hidden worlds. Instead, the stories almost always begin in painfully ordinary places. A petrol station late at night, a quiet suburban doorstep during heavy rain, an isolated road somewhere on the outskirts of town, a knocking at the door long after midnight when the rest of the world is sleeping. And standing there are children. Not monstrous children, not visibly supernatural beings either, just boys and girls who initially appear vulnerable, lost or in need of help. They politely ask to use a phone. They ask for a lift home. They ask to wait inside until their parents arrive. Yet almost every person who claims to have encountered them describes the exact same emotional reaction before anything overtly unnatural even occurs. An overwhelming and immediate sense of dread that seems to erupt from somewhere far deeper than the rational thought. Witnesses struggle to describe it properly afterwards because the fear arrives before the explanation does. Long before the eyes are noticed, people claim they somehow know instinctively that allowing these children inside would be a catastrophic mistake. And then eventually they notice the eyes themselves, entirely black from edge to edge, devoid of a visible iris or soul, as the children are staring out at the world through smooth pools of darkness rather than human eyes at all. Tonight's episode explores one of the internet's most fascinating and psychologically unsettling modern legends. We are going to trace where the Black-Eyed Children mythology began, how it spread across the world, and why the phenomenon continues disturbing people decades after the first reports surfaced online. More importantly, we are going to explore the encounters themselves, because once you begin reading through these stories in detail, something genuinely strange starts to emerge. The locations change, the witnesses change, the decades even change, yet somehow the emotional core of the encounters remains remarkably consistent, as though every witness is brushing against the same deeply unsettling atmosphere from entirely different corners of the world. I wanted to give you the origin of the legend. So unlike ancient folklore, passed carefully between generations across centuries, the Black-Eyed Children belong entirely to the modern age. Their mythology was not born around campfires or candlelit taverns, but within the strange anonymous landscapes of the early internet during the mid-1990s. It was a time when online forums still felt mysterious and intimate, when paranormal stories spread slowly between strangers sitting alone at glowing computer screens late at night. Most researchers trace the beginning of the phenomenon back to a Texas journalist named Brian Bethel. In 1996, Bethel shared an account online describing a deeply unsettling encounter he allegedly experienced while sitting in his parked car outside a movie theatre in Abilene, Texas. According to his account, two boys approached the driver's side window and asked for a ride home so they could collect money from their mother to buy cinema tickets. Initially, nothing about the encounter seemed particularly unusual. The boys appeared ordinary enough, perhaps between 10 and 14 years old, and their request itself was completely mundane. Yet almost immediately, Bethel became aware that something about the interaction felt profoundly wrong, in a way he could not explain logically. Later, he would describe the boys as speaking with an unnaturally calm confidence that felt entirely disconnected from their age. Their voices lacked emotional warmth. Their mannerisms seemed strangely rehearsed, and almost as though they understood how human conversation worked mechanically without fully understanding the emotional rhythm underneath it. The entire interaction carried an atmosphere that Bethel later described as deeply oppressive and instinctively terrifying. Then he noticed the eyes. They were entirely black. Not dark brown beneath poor lighting, not enlarged pupils, completely black from edge to edge, impossibly flat and consuming beneath the glow of the parking lot lights. Bethel later explained that the moment he truly registered what he was looking at, every instinct in his body told him to leave immediately. Terrified, he rolled the window shut and drove away before the boys could continue speaking to him. Ordinarily, this story might have vanished into obscurity like thousands of other paranormal anecdotes scattered across forgotten internet forums. Instead, something unusual happened. Other people began responding with encounters carrying eerily similar details. Not identical stories, which would have been easier to dismiss, but experiences sharing the same strange emotional fingerprints. Children appearing unexpectedly at night, requests for entry into homes or vehicles, overwhelming feelings of dread, emotionless speech, and of course, the black eyes. Within only a few hours, the black-eyed children had evoked into one of the internet's first truly modern urban legends. And perhaps the most fascinatingly of all, many people began claiming they'd experienced encounters long before ever discovering the mythology itself. Oh, I love this. Isn't this brilliant? Right, honestly. Right, so this is why the stories feel so disturbing. So one of the reasons the black-eyed children phenomenon has remained so psychologically effective is because it exploits something deeply human and instinctive. Children are supposed to symbolize vulnerability. Human beings are biologically wired to protect them. So when we see a child alone at night asking for help, our immediate reaction is almost always empathy before suspicion. The black-eyed children stories distort that instinct in a profoundly uncomfortable way. Witnesses consistently describe feeling torn between compassion and terror, as though some ancient survival mechanism is desperately trying to override ordinary social behaviour. Interestingly, the children themselves rarely behave aggressively. In fact, many witnesses specifically emphasise how calm and polite they appear initially. They do not scream or threaten, they ask quietly to come inside, yet beneath the calmness sits something uncanny. Witnesses often describe the sensation as feeling like the children are performing. The children frequently wear outdated clothing that seems subtly disconnected from the present day. Some witnesses describe old-fashioned church attire, formal dresses, or clothing styles that feel oddly timeless. Animals, particularly dogs, reportedly react violently around them, often barking, growling, or retreating before the witness themselves notices anything unusual. I have actually heard that cats are the protectors of the underworld and dogs are the protectors of this world. So it doesn't surprise me that dogs start acting violently because they need to protect us, don't they? I think that's their role. That's why they're so good at it. Many of these encounters, like I said before, they occur in spaces such as roads, doorways, parking lots, or petrol stations, places that already carry a strange liminal atmosphere late at night. And then there is the repeated emphasis on permission. Again and again, the children ask to be invited in. The single detail has fueled endless speculation online because it mirrors ancient folklore surrounding vampires and demonic entities, both traditionally unable to cross thresholds without an invitation. Some paranormal investigators believe the black-eyed children are supernatural predators, disguising themselves as vulnerable children in order to manipulate empathy. Others claim that they may represent extraterrestrial entities imperfectly imitating human behaviour. More skeptical interpretations suggest that the phenomenon is psychological myth shaped by collective fear, internet storytelling, and the uncanny valley effect, where something appears almost human but subtly wrong in the ways that deeply disturb the subconscious mind. And honestly, perhaps the ambiguity is precisely why the legend survives. The black-eyed children exist in a uniquely modern space between folklore and psychology, where nobody can fully prove or disprove what people believe they experienced. Now, this is one of the most famous stories about black-eyed children. It's called the Vermont story. So one of the most infamous accounts connected to the phenomenon allegedly took place in rural Vermont during a winter storm. Whether this story is genuine or fictional has long since become almost irrelevant, because at this point it functions less like eyewitness testimony and more like modern folklore itself. Now, according to the account, an elderly couple was sitting quietly inside their home one snowy evening when 3 heavy knocks echoed through the house. Outside, snow covered the driveway and the surrounding roads were almost completely deserted beneath the storm. When the couple opened the front door, they found 2 children standing silently outside, a boy and a girl, both pale and unnaturally still beneath the porch light. The children quietly explained that their parents would be arriving soon and asked whether they could wait inside the house until they arrived. At first, the couple hesitated. The children avoided eye contact entirely and responded to questions with short, emotionless answers. Yet sympathy eventually overcame caution and they invited the pair inside from the cold. The children sat together silently on the sofa while the wife prepared hot chocolate in the kitchen. The husband attempted making conversation but quickly became unsettled by how strangely detached the children seemed. They answered almost nothing directly. The atmosphere inside the house reportedly became increasingly oppressive, and their cat immediately reacted, hissing violently before fleeing the room altogether. Then the wife finally looked directly into the children's faces. Later, she would describe their eyes as resembling a starless universe, completely black without any visible distinction between pupils and iris, etc. Around the same moment, her husband suddenly developed a severe nosebleed, and the power throughout the house abruptly failed, plunging the hallway into darkness. My goodness, this sounds like a thing of bloody nightmares. Our parents are here. When the couple looked outside, they reportedly saw 2 unnaturally large, tall men standing silently at the edge of the driveway before the children disappeared into the darkness alongside them. According to the story, strange misfortunes followed in the weeks afterwards. Their cats disappeared one by one, and the husband later developed an aggressive skin cancer. Whether it's coincidence, embellishment, or fiction, stories like this became central to the mythology surrounding the black-eyed children because they combine domestic normality with an overwhelming atmosphere of instinctive wrongness. Now, this next section is all of the stories that I found for you on Reddit based on the black-eyed kids or children. I think you'll agree that they are a little bit spooky and they all do follow a very strong theme. So this story is from Synth3R. And when I read it, I was a little bit like, I don't agree with what they've done, but the story is still scary enough to tell you. She says, I thought that the black-eyed children were just an urban legend until I met one. And that was the title that drew me in. I was fully invested when I read that title. Then I carried on reading the story and I thought, I don't want to say that it's karma that they had an experience. And then I carried on reading the story and it got really sad. So let's read all of it together. And this girl says, if you've ever heard of Cannock Chase in the United Kingdom, then you've probably also heard a lot of ghost stories surrounding it. The most famous one, however, has to be about the black-eyed children of Cannock Chase. I'd not heard about these children. I'm ashamed of myself. I will be doing some research because I could have put them in this podcast. But if needs must, don't worry, I can always do another podcast. So this girl says, I heard a lot of stories but never really believed them myself. Me and my friends Sam and Becky run a fairly successful paranormal YouTube channel. We mostly film around the West Midlands in haunted locations. We mainly just do stuff like using a Ouija board, asking spirits to communicate with us, and pretending that we're making contact with them. This is the bit I didn't like. I just think if you're going to do paranormal stuff, don't be a clout chaser. Like, start it because you love it. Like, I started my pages because I love telling the stories. Did I know really what I was doing? No. Did I expect them to grow? Absolutely not. I just did it because I loved it. And that's why I think they're growing so much, because I think people can kind of get that when they listen to my stuff. I honestly, hand on heart, have not started this with an agenda. I know that obviously content makes people money, which is brilliant if you love doing it. Yes, obviously my goal is to have this more as like a stream of income, but that's only really come about after I realized that people kind of like listening to me tell ghost stories. I didn't actually think it was a thing before then. Anyway, I'm blabbing on, but I don't think you should start a YouTube channel if you've got ill intent to mislead people, no matter what you're doing. And it just kind of annoys me more that it's paranormal in this context, because I just think we already have enough skeptics out there, guys. We don't need more people causing absolute mayhem online, making people further believe that the paranormal isn't real. Okay, that's my 2 pence. I'll shut up now. So basically, they're like conning people, aren't they, on this channel? So she says, me and Becky will be the people on the channel who go out and try and communicate with spirits, and Sam is the cameraman who occasionally throws a rock in the background so we can all act startled and go, oh, what was that? It gets us fairly good views, enough at least that it's a decent source of income on top of our day jobs. We were celebrating our 4th anniversary of doing this YouTube channel soon, and so we wanted to do a special video. Living in Wolverhampton, Cannock Chase is about a half-an-hour drive away, so it made sense to do it in such a popular location. We arrived there dead on midnight. Why? And filmed, well, I suppose if you know you're faking it, you wouldn't be scared, would you? And you don't believe in it yourself. Yeah, I would be pooing my pants. So they've arrived there at midnight. She says we filmed for a few hours and nothing happened. During our Ouija board ritual, we called the black-eyed children to make contact with us. We mocked and imitated them making contact with us, and even had Becky act like she was possessed. Oh dear, this doesn't sound very good, does it? When we finished, we decided to head back to our car, and we were having a bit of a laugh about the whole thing, and Sam was going to take the footage home to edit it. When we arrived at our car, Becky noticed a couple of kids who must have been no older than 15 in the background. They were slowly making their way to the car. Sam made a comment about how it was kind of ironic and a little bit creepy, but we got in and drove off without waiting to see what they wanted. I know, kind of an arsehole thing to do, but we didn't want to become the victims of a robbery or anything like that. The next night, I was lying in bed when all of a sudden my dog started going absolutely crazy downstairs. I went down to see what was going on. As I got closer, I remember this immense feeling of terror coming over me. My dog was facing the door, hackles up. There was a knock on the door. I looked out the window and I immediately felt sick to my stomach. There was 2 children. One boy around 15 and one girl who must have been no older than 11 was standing outside. You must let us in, the boy said. We need to call our mother. The way that he spoke was not typical of the children from Wolverhampton at all. He sounded posh, but something was off in tone. I can't quite make out what though. Why do you need to call your mum? I asked. This time the girl spoke. You must let us in, she said. Our mother will be very worried. I felt my hand going for the door and I was terrified, and in my subconscious I knew exactly what they were. It's like I was in a trance. I was oblivious to my dog going crazy behind me when all of a sudden he did something that he's never done before. He bit me on the back of the leg. He bit me so hard that it drew blood, and I snapped out of it. I immediately pulled away from the door. The 2 came to the window and stared at me. Their eyes were black, completely black. This time they spoke together. You wanted to speak to us last night, but we couldn't catch up with you. You must let us in. It won't take long. I remember grabbing my dog and running upstairs. The knocking continued all night, and it was getting louder and louder and more furious as the night went on. Only when there was daylight did they stop. I immediately called Sam and Becky and told them what had happened. They told me that the same thing had happened to them too, but they couldn't snap out of it. They let them in. I asked them what happened. They said the kids walked around the house a bit and then they left. They said that the whole time they were there, they also felt this immense sense of terror and doom. We never did upload that YouTube video. Doing so made it feel like if we'd done that, it would have been inviting them to come back. A few weeks later, I got a message from Sam's brother. Him and Becky had been involved in a car accident. They had been driving around Cannock Chase when they lost control of the car and ended up wrapping it round a tree. They didn't make it. I have no way of telling for sure whether them letting the black-eyed children into their house was the cause of this. But the fact that they did and that they died near Cannock Chase and I didn't, makes me think that maybe if I had let them in, I would be dead too. I still get nightmares of them. I still worry that they're going to stand outside my room and ask me to let them in. I wake up in the middle of the night screaming, terrified. I spend hours at night debating whether I should take a peek outside or not, because if I do and they're there, they may see me. But the thought of not looking is equally terrifying, because what if they are there just patiently waiting for me to slip up? Well, I won't slip up. I've been taking precautions. I've gotten myself some more dogs, lots of dogs in fact, because if one of them can stop me from opening the door, maybe half a dozen will scare them off for good. And I never leave the house without them. They follow me everywhere. Some people think that I'm crazy, but I'm not crazy. I'm just being safe, because they're not going to get me. I promise. I swear they're not going to get me. They won't. Now listen, if you are tricking people on a YouTube channel, your character probably is going to be questioned in this. So is this Reddit story true? I don't know. The thing that caught me the most is that this person, she's expressed what they've done. She's owned up to it. She's laid it honest on the table. I don't know if this is real or not, but if it is, it's incredibly sad. And it also shows you that you should not mess with anything that you do not understand. Do not play with Ouija boards if you don't know how to open them up and close them properly, or if you're not with someone who knows how to do that. People think that you're just born, you live your life, you watch EastEnders, you come home, you do it all again the next day. And yes, the existence that we've made here, I think, is curated by some people to keep us all kind of in this system. I won't go into that. But we're energetic beings. There are realms to this shit. There is stuff going on here that you will never understand, that I will never understand. The fact that so much darkness happens is classic, isn't it? It's like someone moves into a house and they are happy, upbeat, just love life, and then within a few weeks they start to become different. Their personality changes, they have mood swings, they're angry all the time. You just see it so much. You see it, I mean, I do, maybe it's because it's in my world more. If you're listening to this, and you must see it too in programs that you watch. This stuff isn't just happening willy-nilly. It's not like these people are mentally ill or disturbed. They're having a real experience, and people just poo-poo it because they've never had that experience too, and I hate that so much. But there are darker things in this world than we will ever know, and you can feel it. You can feel when you're around a bad person. You can feel when a situation or a circumstance is bad or it's going to turn bad. Your body will let you know. That's why I find the Black-Eyed Kids so interesting, because people are really getting alerted by their bodies, by the dogs. And anyone just picks up a Ouija board who doesn't understand the power of these different realms of whatever they are. I don't even know what terminology to use for them. These different dimensions where these non-human entities live, and they are real. They are absolutely real. People think it's funny. They're like, "Hi, yeah, I'll just play a Ouija board. It's fine." Until these things visit them at 3 a.m. I don't know why it's 3 a.m. Funny time in it. It must be the way that the energies are shifting. It must be like a thinner veil for them to get through. But they think it's fun and games until they get an experience and they realize after a few weeks that either someone that they love's died, they've got ill, or they've actually started to be oppressed by this thing. And it's only then that they think, oh shit, this actually isn't a joke. But then no one else believes them, because the world, for some reason, has been kept ignorant. It's like if we all police each other and laugh at each other about the fact that ghosts could be real, then no one else needs to kind of keep an eye on our thoughts about ghosts, do they? Like, they don't need to try and disprove them to us, because we're all fighting amongst ourselves trying to disprove them to each other or prove them to each other. I don't know. I just think it's really fascinating, and I think actually the people who run this world know a lot about this, and I think they actually use dark magic, some of them, to get to their power in all of the places that they're in. What I'm trying to say basically is don't underestimate this shit, okay? Let's go back to the Black-Eyed Children before I start opening a can of worms. Right, now this next story is from someone who's deleted their page, but it says, I've encountered the Black-Eyed Children. Now this person says, an old friend hit me up and we started reminiscing. And then I remembered this. I believe I've encountered the Black-Eyed Children over a decade ago in rural Appalachia. This has always low-key disturbed me. keeping in touch to this day, we've never brought it up again. We were at a local state park sort of place between 9 p.m. and 1 a.m. I remember we were parked alongside the woods and some picnic tables. It was pretty desolate and we were technically trespassing. We're both 17 at the time, male and female. And what we were doing, I will leave to your imagination. They were getting freaky, guys. They were doing bad, naughty things up in the Appalachia, which is such a weird place to do freaky things because actual freaky things happen up there, like skinwalkers and all that kind of stuff. You don't want to be doing all that and mixing your freak with that freak because, you know, I don't know, I suppose they could have a freak off, but it just wouldn't end well. No one wants to be naked around there. Imagine running through the woods naked because some kind of skinwalker's chasing you. Absolutely not. No. I've just clicked that this is a girl telling this story, and she says, as our curfews were approaching and we were finishing up our time together, how lovely, we experienced a very ominous feeling. He was in the driver's seat preparing to start the car and to pull off. The car doesn't start. We sort of laughed it off as it wasn't the first time and talked. Suddenly to the right, the passenger side where I was sitting, we see faint lights coming out of the wood. The ominous feeling intensified. Emerging from the woods, there was 4 to 5 children, younger than us, like appearing to be 7 to 11 years old. I'm not going to claim they had black eyes because it was dark and I don't remember as I was pretty shook. I didn't read about the black-eyed children lore phenomena until years later, which described everything else that we experienced. She says, all I can say is they were not normal. They did not belong. The cabins at the park were not occupied. They weren't even getting rented out as it was autumn, winter. We were miles from the park's hotel. There were no adults and they were absolutely out of place. And what were the lights? I don't know. But the closest thing I can compare them to are glow sticks. As if they had opened a package of those novelty glow sticks that include bracelets, necklaces or wands. But it wasn't like they were having fun or goofing off. They just stopped, stood there and stared at us. He tried asking what they were doing here, if they were lost, where are their parents, but there was no response. The oldest looking male child, a bit heavy set with a grey hoodie on, approached the vehicle just in front where the passenger headlight corner would be. My friend started really freaking out at this moment. I think at this point we know you're a bit more than friends, okay? Your bit of stuff started freaking out at this moment. He locked the doors and was like, hell no, we gotta go. He's talking absolute rational sense. Eventually the car starts. The children don't move and the kids stay put in front of the car. My friend eventually yells to the kids, I'm going to run you over. The boy slowly backs away, raises his arm and points at us as we were leaving. I didn't look back. And they've put, I absolutely am not making this up. To my recollection, this story is 100% true. Wow. Now, those kids, I'm not going to lie, 100% knew that car was not starting, didn't they? And they probably caused it that time. I know it didn't start before, but it feels like they sensed a vulnerability there and they were about to pounce. They saw them getting freaky. The kids were probably watching them getting freaky. That's gross. I mean, it's their fault. It's not the 17-year-old's fault in this situation. The little kid's being creepy. Yeah, that's a bit of a weird one, isn't it? This next story is from Environmental Rip 2975 on Reddit. And they've put, are the black-eyed children real? ? And this person says, hi, so I've known about the black-eyed children creepypasta urban legend, but I may have had an actual encounter with one years ago. This happened in Portland, Oregon. Massive shout out to Portland, Oregon. I've been there. I've got a couple of friends who live there and it's absolutely stunning. I went in a natural hot spring. My breath was taken from me. It was so, so beautiful. Anyway, so this happened in Portland, Oregon around David Douglas High School. I looked up black-eyed children and there have actually been a few encounters and reports of them in Portland back in the 90s. This encounter happened to me during my high school years around 2009 to 2011. I can't remember the exact year, but I want to say I was about 14 at the time. And it was around late 2 to 1 a.m, maybe a bit later, I believe. It was a weekend. My brother and I were up watching South Park and we heard knocking on our garage window. Then I heard knocking at our window. We had one of the huge windows that covered the front of the house The curtains were up, but I peeked outside and saw a woman. She looked very pale with black hair and her eyes were very dark. Now, she very well could have been a tweaker, but the next part creeps me out the most. After knocking on the window, she knocks on the door and asks us to let her in. Me being the person I am, I'm like, hell no, but my brother was 10 at the time. I loved that they were 10 and watching South Park, by the way. And walks over to the door and he's going to let her in. I have to forcibly hold him down until the person leaves. My mum and her boyfriend wake up from hearing me holding down my brother and they ask if someone knocked on the door, and I tell them what had just happened. One thing I heard is with the black-eyed children encounters is something they will force people to do with no recollection of them doing it is open the door. And that's why I bring this up. I asked my brother if he remembers this lady, the knocking, or trying to let her in, and he always tells me that he doesn't. To this day, the experience creeps me out, and ever since I heard of the black-eyed children phenomena, because everyone who's had a claim about them have said exactly what I experienced. Funny though that it showed as a woman this time. Maybe it's because the kids were like little enough to maybe let a woman in who's on her own. Again, a woman on her own is just as vulnerable as children on their own, isn't it? Odd one, that one. Very, very odd that it wasn't an actual child. This story is from someone called Blondie Cake 7, and they wrote this 2 years ago. And they say, I remember listening to a radio show years ago, and people called in with their experiences. One that stuck out was a woman who had her son with her and left him in the car while she ran in the shop to grab something. When she returned, a black-eyed child was next to her son in the car. She grabbed her son and ran to a phone to call her husband because she was too afraid to drive the car the child was in. When they got back to the car, the kid was gone and her husband swapped cars with her. On the way home, the husband was in a bad accident, but I believe he survived. There was a few more, and they all creeped me out. Dogs were very scared of them, and they always tried to come inside. See, these stories are scary. That's a short one, and that's terrifying. Imagine leaving your child outside thinking, oh, they'll be all right. And then that child's like, yeah, just let this horrendous entity in the car, just gave it permission. So this next one is from Ether Rhubarb 5775, and they wrote it a year ago. So this person says, it was 2 a.m. in 1998 in Suffolk, East Anglia in England. I had a metal staircase leading up to my flat. I hear knocking, so I went to open the door and there was a boy and a girl stood there. I was rather confused and I asked, where are your family? And they said, they're in the car. Can I call for help? Can I come in? I was 18 and thought, nah, not having kids in my house. He then said, why aren't you scared of our eyes? At that point, I was like, God protect me, not being scared as I believe in God. I was like, no way. And I looked behind me quickly because I left my Xbox on and someone was shooting my person in my game. I looked back and they were gone. Now, this was a 2-second glance back and they were gone. Now, I would explain that the metal staircase makes a sound whenever someone walks up or down. I never heard it in both them coming down and leaving. It's like they were beamed up. I never thought anything about it until I saw a picture of a kid and it came flashing back. My dogs, I guess they've seen a picture of a black-eyed kid maybe. My dogs keep freaking out and they keep looking behind me and barking like someone or something is behind me. I look behind me and he stops barking. That's creepy. This next one is from someone called Stalked by You, lovely name, on Reddit. And the title is, I found a man who claims he let the black-eyed children into his home. He says, hey everyone, my name is Kevin, and I read on here more than once about people encountering these black-eyed children. I personally find it creepy as fuck, and I pray to God I never encounter such evil. It would be terrifying. The only thing about these encounters is everyone seems to have a natural instinct to not let them in the house. Thank God. So I've been curious as to what exactly happens if you do let them in. But I was visiting my girlfriend's great aunt, she's called Mandy, in a psychiatric ward, and I overheard a man mumbling about children with black eyes and that no one was listening to him. Immediately my head snapped his way and he caught my attention, so I went over and had a little chat with him as they were all eating lunch. I do my best to retell the story he told me word for word. As I said, my girlfriend's great auntie Mandy is in the psychiatric ward, and that's where I am when I'm speaking to this man. He was sitting at the table next to me and I could hear him just mumbling to himself, picking at his arms. He looked as though he was drugged pretty heavily, so I guess there is no way of knowing how true this story is. I'm just going to repeat what he told me. I said, "Excuse me, sir, did you say something about the black-eyed kids?" I leaned over and asked him quietly. His head snapped straight towards me and stared at me intensely. He was probably around 65 years old, but the years were not good to him. He had huge bags under his eyes, and there were dark spots covering his face and arms. His hair a clumpy, ratted mess with knots sticking out everywhere. The only thing he kept up was his beard. Honestly, with his overall mess of an appearance, it looked strange how his face was so cleanly shaven. "Who are you, boy?" he asked, snapping me from my judgmental trance. "My name is Kevin, and I thought I heard you mumbling something about the black-eyed children," I asked again. "Yeah, I suppose I did, didn't I?" He looked confused. "I've heard of these children before and was wondering, could you maybe give me a little bit of information about them if you've seen them or know anyone who has? Any information on them would be really great." "You don't want to meet them, boy. They are pure evil." He looked to the ground, shaking his head. "So I've heard. How have you heard of them, sir?" I asked hopefully. "They ruined my whole life and got me locked in this place," he shouted, startling me. "Shh!" I frantically looked around, noticing a guard stand up. I waved them away, letting them know everything was fine, with a flashing smile. "Please, sir, can you tell me more about them? I want to know what to do if I ever encounter them," I pleaded. "That's very simple, boy. Never let them in. No matter how distressed or nice they seem, never let them in," he said with a lowered voice. "Well, do you know what happens if you do?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Son, I made a horrible choice letting those demons in my home back in 1992. A tear rolled down his cheek. "Holy shit, I finally found someone claiming to have let one of those kids in, and he's alive. This could be my only chance to find out what happens." I had to hear his story. "Please, sir, will you tell me exactly what happened?" He looked at me for a second, and then he looks around the room. He looked incredibly nervous, like someone was going to come after him if he told me. After what felt like an eternity, he finally looked into my eyes and slowly shook his head. This is the point where I will stop telling the story like a conversation. I'll just tell you exactly what he told me to save time and a lot of typing. So this guy tells me, "It was November 19th, 1992, and I was watching television downstairs while my wife, Helen, was asleep upstairs, as were my two children, Mary and Bradley. I was watching an old horror movie called Evil Dead. It was probably around 1:30 a.m, and after the movie, I planned to go upstairs to bed. All of a sudden, I heard someone pounding on my front door. Who the fuck? I remember getting pretty angry because who in the hell would be pounding my goddamn door at 1:30 a.m. in the morning? So pretty pissed off, I stormed to the front door, yanked it open, ready to yell at whoever was ignorant enough to disturb my night. And when I looked down, it was two children, a boy probably around 8 years old and a girl maybe 11 or 12. They both had their heads hung down looking at their feet. That's also when I noticed they were out in bare feet. Now it's mid-November in Michigan, so anybody that doesn't know, it's fucking cold. What the hell are kids doing wandering around pounding on people's doors in the middle of the night in bare feet? I hollered. Them kids never did look up or anything, they just sat there. It sounded like the boy was crying softly. Well, I demanded. Please sir, we're cold, the girl said quietly, still looking at her feet. That's also when I noticed their feet weren't even red or anything, like they wasn't cold or nothing. Well, no shit, you're walking around in the middle of November in bare fucking feet. I was shocked and pissed off, so I wasn't the nicest person in that moment. Can we come in, please? We're so cold, the little boy suggested. They never did look up at me, and I never saw them black eyes. All right, yes, you can call your parents and have them come pick you up. Understand? I said sternly. They both shook their heads. They both just shook their heads that they understood. Then they slowly walked past me into my home. This was when my life changed forever and I would live the most frightening half an hour of my life. That's all it took, them damn kids. Once they got inside, I quickly walked past them and straight for my phone. It was around the corner in the kitchen, so I had to leave them out of sight for a minute. I grabbed it and quickly walked back where I left them, only they were gone. I looked around and couldn't find them anywhere. Kids, where the hell did you go? I shouted. It was at this point I realised just how quiet the house was. I could have sworn I left the television on, but it was silence. It was an eerie quiet. Now I was a grown-ass man, and at that moment, for some reason, I felt fear. It was the feeling, I guess, I can only describe as that there was pure evil in this house, and I was its prey. Hello? I called out one more time. I once again was met with dead silence, so I decided I was going to go look for him. I tiptoed through the kitchen, into the living room, and just as I got to the couch, I heard the first scream. It was coming from upstairs, one of the bedrooms. I've never ran so fast in my life. All the while shouting my wife's name and then my kids. I knew they were in danger, and I wasn't thinking anything about them damn kids in that moment. I was just thinking about helping my family. I got to my wife's room first, and I'll never forget what I saw that night. It'll be burned into my brain forever. When I opened the door, I saw my wife face down on the floor. There was blood everywhere. I ran over to her. As soon as I got next to her, something pulled her under the bed from her feet. "What the fuck?" I shouted and jumped back and landed on my ass. I heard crunching and snapping as her bones snapped repeatedly, and I could hear chunks of her flesh being torn from her body. Ugh, is this true? This is vile. I ran as fast as I could and dove on the ground, yanking up the bed sheets to try and, I don't know, save her, I guess, even though I knew it was far too late. When I pulled the sheets up, she was completely unrecognisable. Her legs bent in a weird position with huge chunks of her meat just gone. Her face was twisted in an expression of pure agony and pain. "Helen!" I shouted and cried my eyes out. I was so upset I almost missed it at first. It was a pair of feet on the opposite side of the bed. My heart hit my chest with a force I've never felt before. I didn't even have time to react as those feet moved inhumanly fast, straight out of the room towards the hall. I looked up and caught a shadow running to where my kids lay sleeping. "No!" I shouted as loud as I could, jumping up and racing after them. I was too late though. The door slammed shut and I couldn't budge it. I screamed at the top of my lungs for them to open the door, but they wasn't having it. And there was no way I was getting this door open. So I quickly ran downstairs and called the police to tell them to get here quick. A scream shattered through my body as I heard my own damn children facing the same fate as my beloved wife, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I was hysterically crying as I ran up the stairs to keep ramming the door. It was pointless. There had to be something against the door because it wasn't even close to giving in. Then after a minute, I heard complete silence again, and I knew my babies were gone. At this point, he stopped telling me the story, and he had to regain his composure. Then he carries on again. I was sitting huddled up in the hallway when I heard the door slowly creak open. I pulled my head from my knees and looked in horror at the shadow slowly approaching the doorway. My heart was racing so fast I was about to pass out. Just before I did, those damn kids stepped out of the room covered in blood. They were smiling these awful grins, and that's when I got to look at their eyes. There was no white, it was just black. Like the devil himself were in these children. That's when everything went black for me, and I must have just fainted because I woke up in the hospital to a frenzy of doctors and policemen bombarding me with questions. I told them what had happened, but of course they didn't believe me. Why would you? I wouldn't. So long story short, on that they found me insane, and I've been here since. At this point, he was done telling me the story. So when I tell you, son, don't ever let those black-eyed kids in your home, you listen to me. I must only be here today because the policeman scared those kids off, or I'd be dead too. I wish I was dead every day. He looked down and began sobbing again. Kevin says I just sat here in disbelief. I mean, here is this guy sitting at a crazy home. So he had to just be insane, right? I'm not sure, but I do know one thing for sure. If black-eyed kids show up at my house, they're staying the fuck outside. That was the most terrifyingly heartbreaking story ever. If that is true, this poor guy, that will never leave him. This next story was written by someone called Carmen Scott, and they wrote it 6 years ago. And the title says, "My Encounter with a Black-Eyed Child, True Horror Story." Obviously, I chose this one. And Carmen says, "I know what you must be thinking. She's just trying to get light." Well, you're wrong. She says, "It was a little past midnight, so I guess it was early hours of this morning. I woke up to the sound of loud banging on my door. My parents were out voting and my sister was still asleep. I went downstairs quietly so I wouldn't wake my sister up. I had cameras, but I decided not to look at them. When I looked through the little peeping hole on the door, I saw children. They didn't quite look normal though. The little boy was around 8 years old. He had weird shoes and an outfit that someone in like the 40s would wear, or just in the 1900s in general. The point is, he dressed old-fashioned, and the girl was around 6 and did not look much better. She had this haircut that a woman would wear in the 90s and an outfit that would be worn in the 70s. Besides that, they looked perfectly normal. "Are you lost?" I asked. "Our parents will be here soon," they both said in unison. "Do you need something? Can we come in?" Right away, I knew that something was off about these kids. Not just the fact that they would dress weirdly, but something in their voices were just off. That's really a common theme, isn't it, with all of these stories? They had voices that no 8 or 6-year-old should have. I suddenly felt dizzy and I knew that something demonic was in these kids. If your parents are almost here, then can't you just wait outside here? I asked. It was a perfectly sweet neighbourhood and there were no robberies or anything like that. And I never even saw a shady person walking around here. They asked once more, but this time they weren't asking, they were starting to get angry. No, you may not, I yelled. I know this sounds bad that I'm saying this to little kids that could be lost come into my house, but there is something off about these kids. That yell woke my sister up and she turned the lights on, which helped me see these kids had black eyes. I screamed and shut the door in their face. My sister asked me what was going on and who was that and why did I yell. I told her to just go back to bed and don't worry about it, and she did as I asked. The kids eventually left, but they did do some damage to my house when I shut the door. They ripped some plants and they cracked the window. Later that night, I did some research on them and found out that they can only come into your house if they get permission. I also found out that it's the same with demons. Like if you summon them and play spiritual games and stuff, if you moved into a house and they are already there, then that's because someone else previously allowed them in or the place was abandoned. There is a slight chance they will come back soon and I'll be ready. When the kids left, they went into a black car with two adult dudes in suits. Just remember, if you ever see a kid with black eyes and pale skin coming towards your house or your car, don't let them in. Now, what I've heard this in a few stories that there's like adult looking escorts. It feels like something is like escorting these kids around to enable them to do this stuff. But I don't understand. Is there like some kind of like underground situation where it's a job? It's like, right, kids, rounding up the demon kids. Right, come on then, let's go kill some humans. Get in the car. Just pretend that you're lost. They love it. They want to help people. They want to feel good about themselves. And then go in and just break their bones and eat their flesh. I think there's some of that going on or something. I'm not too sure. What do you think? Honestly, I'm loving these stories. We've got so many. This next one is from someone called PM Me Cryptids, and it's called Personal Black-Eyed Kid Encounter in 2009. So they say, this is an encounter I experienced in the summer of 2009. They say, I was born and raised in the plains of Texas, specifically in the area where the black-eyed children sightings are prevalent. I had heard the stories, tales and legends, whatever you want to call them, since I was a young man, but never truly believed them. These black-eyed kids was mainly something I entertained as a joke or something to get a rise out of people. This changed in the summer of 2009. It was a warm night in June. I was up late, around 2 a.m, as typically I like to stay up late, especially in the summer, since it would stay fairly warm even after the sun went down. I had just run up to the store to grab a big fountain drink and was returning into my house through the back door when I was approached by two children, a boy and a girl. Again, a boy and a girl seems pretty prevalent, doesn't it? He says, I was very startled that they were there since I wasn't expecting to encounter anyone in my backyard so late at night. The little boy asked, can we come in? We need to use the phone, we're lost. This was when I noticed the blackness of their eyes. Both of them had eyes so black they were like pits. This is also when my heart sank. I couldn't believe I was actually seeing them, that they were right in front of me. As I mentioned before, I'd heard the legends of the black-eyed children most of my life, so there was no way I was going to let them in my house. I darted in the back door and locked it as quickly as I could, and once I was inside, I ran upstairs and flipped on the lights to try and see if they were still outside. Thankfully, by then they were gone. I had so much adrenaline pumping by that point, though, that I grabbed a weapon and began searching the house and making sure the doors and windows were locked. It took me hours to get to sleep that night, and it's an encounter that will stay with me for the rest of my life. These entities took the form of something most people would view as innocent, weak, mild, and try to trick unsuspecting people to do God knows what with them or to them. I'm just glad that my reflexes kicked in and I was able to live to tell the tale. Ugh. He won't stay outside anymore, will he? He'll be going straight inside when the sun goes down. Not on your Nelly will he stay outside anymore. Let's read two more. This one is from AR141510 from Reddit, and it was written 3 years ago. And they say, here's my story. I'm a bit shook. I drove out to my grandpa's barn to grab my brother's wallet. It isn't that haunted 3 a.m. shit. This happened about 9 p.m. While I was grabbing my brother's wallet, I had a feeling I was being watched. A bit of a detail, about a mile between my house and the barn is a culvert. It's before a large hill with a curve halfway through. You have to slow down to avoid a possible accident. I slowed down to a crawl on this back road, and there were these kids on the road. I'm just a good-natured redneck, so I stopped to offer help. I had heard these stories growing up about the funky shit happening on this road. Everything from ghost lights to a woman who asks for a ride and then screams if you say yes before disappearing. But this is new. I stopped and asked these kids if they were okay. I mean, it's summer and they may have been riding four-wheelers and it wrecked or broke down. One kid asked for a ride, but his voice was too calm and he didn't make eye contact. I looked at the other. I live in the deep south where the mosquito is the state bird. The other kid had mosquitoes all over it. Didn't swat them or anything. So I finally asked him, "Why are you looking down?" He looks up and his eyes were as black as coal. I stomped on the gas as hard as I could, soaring up the hill, barely making the curve. None of that running from a demon or fighting for my life shit. They both stared at me as I zipped up the road, flinging gravel and dust. I love how much of a redneck he is. He's like, "Nope, fuck that. See you later, baby." And this last one is quite long, so I think you're going to enjoy this one. And it's from someone called Joel F40, and they wrote it 6 years ago. They say, "I have my own story. It's really why I got into the paranormal and conspiracy things altogether. I was a huge skeptic and didn't believe in anything that wasn't backed by evidence. You could tell me about all types of shit and I'd just laugh and brush it off. I'm Dominican, so the Caribbean in general is mixed with a lot of fucked up, creepy shit due to its long history. I was sent to the Dominican Republic all the time during summer break when I was younger. My grandma lived there, so that's who I stayed with whenever I went over. She lived near the national park. I'm really sorry, guys, I can't pronounce it. It's something like Jaragua Baruco Enriquillo National Park. I'm so sorry, I can't say that. I can't. So it was cool to go and see different animals all the time. That park is also well known in the country to harbour weird things, but I never cared because, again, I was skeptic. I had friends I'd go and fuck around with. We would play baseball, smoke weed, drink, and you could really do whatever since the country is practically lawless. That particular day, we played manhunt and all of my friends ran and hid. My grandma would always tell me, "Whenever you see the streetlights turn on, please come home." I never paid mind. Mind you, all of my family, including my neighbours, would talk about weird shit they would see late at night coming from the surrounding forest. Men who looked like humans from the waist down, but had the head of a frog, were always seen emerging from caves and lakes. Weird lights, humanoids, UFOs, black magic, voodoo, or demonic witches who would kidnap kids, never to be seen again. Always supposedly seen as well. I enjoyed the stories, but never paid them any mind. Anyways, it was getting darker, so to save my ass from getting an hour-long lecture, I sped up the process of trying to find my friends. I looked everywhere and didn't seem to find anyone. My grandma's town was pretty small, so everyone knew each other, but it was surrounded by forest, so you could get lost quick. I'm walking around for what seems like years and still haven't found anyone. Seems after a few minutes that it was getting late and I'm getting really hungry. I don't recognise all where I am, just a bunch of trees and some really dark, dense forest. Everything was getting darker and darker until I saw what looked like my two friends near a bonfire. I rushed up and something told me not to get close. I'm glad I didn't. They asked if they could play with me. I asked who they were and where they came from, and they stood quiet and didn't say anything. That's when I noticed how pale their skin was and their eyes were pitch black, like they were fully under demonic possession. I felt the biggest fucking chill come up my spine. After a few seconds, they asked if they could come home with me because they were lost, and that's when I started hearing branches cracking behind me. I felt a malicious vibe coming from these two kids, as if I stayed longer, I'd be hurt or killed or both. So I started running back the way I came. They started running right behind me too. What was really scary about the whole thing was I heard 4 sets of footsteps, not 2. I kept running and running for about a minute and a half until I heard what sounded like my grandfather and my uncle screaming my name. I ran as fast as I could with my lungs burning at this point. I caught up to my family and my friends. They hugged me and looked mad but happy to see me. They asked where I'd been and I told them I was playing manhunt and was looking for my friends who were hiding. That's when they told me they were worried sick because I was nowhere to be seen for 2 hours. That's when I got more chills up my spine. I know I wasn't gone for 2 hours. It had felt like 10 minutes. To this day, I don't know what to say about the missing time. but other people have had time stop as well, as if they were in another dimension when encountering different things. I went to sleep that night fucking horrified and vowed never to go back to my grandma's ever again. I visited a couple of times, but never stayed for a month like I used to. Everyone now tells my story about the black-eyed kids that I saw to everyone who comes to visit. They all believe me. It's crazy, but never do I ever want to see those kids again. I definitely believe they were demonic or like alien in nature, possibly from another planet or dimension. Who knows? All I know is a couple of other villagers driving on the highway that goes through our town and near the national park has seen weird objects in the sky and black figures on the side of the road for decades. Weird place, but thought I would share one of the scariest things I've ever experienced. Let's end it on that one. My God, can you imagine? Not sure about the frog head though. The frog head thing, that's on another level. An absolute another level of weird shit that's going on in this world right now. I mean, I'm starting to believe that, I don't even know, things that we thought were mythical maybe aren't mythical. Who actually knows what is going on? The fact these kids started running after him, my God, that would have made me absolutely shit myself. I would have ran until my legs fell off. That's what I would have done. Anyway, I really hope that you've enjoyed this episode. I've tried to make it nice and long for you so you can enjoy all of the stories. And if you've had an experience like this with black-eyed children, I know that the experience is probably going to go far and few between. But hopefully this episode keeps going and going. And if you have had an experience, you'll let me know. Because I would love to talk to you. Again, who knows if this is real? But I don't think people are stupid. And actually, if you've had an experience and it's terrifying, who's going to believe you anyway? You may as well tell your story on Reddit. You know, you may as well. You've got nothing to lose. Anyway, please follow the channel. Please email me at the Darkling Chronicles 25@gmail.com. I'll put all of the details in my description. If you have your own ghost story, if you have a ghost video, a ghost picture, an EVP, something creepy that you've seen or you've heard, or somewhere that you want me to talk about, let me know. Let me know in the comments, send me an email, let's have a chat. I love talking to everyone. I would welcome a conversation with you. Don't just think that because I'm on a podcast, you can't message me. I'm just a normal person like you. Just happen to be a bit of a weirdo who wants to talk about ghosts and stuff on a microphone to a camera with no one else but my dog in the room. It's just how I'm rolling these days. Anyway, you lot are amazing. Thank you so much for listening. I'll catch you in the next one. Just have the most beautiful week. Don't worry about what anyone else does. Stay in your vibe. Have a beautiful week and I'll catch you soon.